right, evidently we're live and we don't have animation or an intro, and that's fine because we don't need your fancy toys, Jim. This is Go Astros. It is Monday, June 10th. I'm Andy. That's Brian. Jim, our normal third mic and fearless leader, is off continent swimming with sharks and climbing volcanoes and whatever you do in Honolulu these days.
It's important
Brian,
to understand for our listeners to understand we're resentful today. Me, because I'm not going to Hawaii, and Andy, because he's no longer in Hawaii. So we're just resentful of Jim.
It was really, really hard to get back on the plane Thursday morning and Thursday evening, and then landing Friday morning. But we're doing a cold open because, we are both fans of Saturday Night Live. We're of that certain generation. So we'll pretend there's going to be some credits somewhere in the middle of the show, but probably not.
I'm hoping to be the Phil Hartman of today's presentation.
Brian, you are the glue. I think that's fair to say. It's a mixed bag for Astros fans. This is so far a winning month. We're 5-3. We've split 2 with the Twins because I don't have to count anything that happened in May. We've won a series with the Cardinals and won a series with the Angels. As recently as yesterday, we also lost a game. We lost a game to the Cardinals we probably should have won. So I think we're full on in the emotional hole of the season, where normally winning 2 series in a row is not a bad thing. But if you go on Astros Twitter and talk to most of your Astros fan friends, you will find out that most of us aren't all that thrilled with the current state of the team. Brian, where are you? Where are you in your emotional hole right now?
Yeah, I mean, they just went through a 4-2 week. They won series. We've talked about getting out of the actual standings holes. About it's a long process. And they need to, keep stacking series wins, which they've done 2 in a row now. And they go play a reeling Giants team who they could do that again. So again, from that standpoint, it's good. But the losses are massive emotional holes because they dug such a big hole going 7-19 to start the season. And so any loss is annoying. The 2 losses this week were annoying, and they were very different types of losses because they lost the Wednesday game to the Cardinals by not having competitive at-bats. I think they fouled off like 7 balls in the entire game. And the Cardinals, I think, threw a collective team Maddox. And, of course, yesterday, I kind of want to say the less said about it, the better. But, I can't, it was an exceedingly frustrating loss because you certainly felt, as you said, that's a game you definitely should have won. And as much as, in sort of the long part of it, winning the series is good. They had 2 really nice wins over the Angels. Yesterday, something that sticks with you. And again, the emotional hole, I think, is pretty accurate there, Andy, because it's, it felt like more losses than wins in the Angels series, even though that's literally not true.
Well, and as Craig Harvey mentioned, I think it was a double gut punch because a lot of us are trying to figure out what's going on with our high-priced bullpen. And as of late, even though, the losses on Hader yesterday, most of the finger pointing, if it's not at Joe Espada, is at Ryan Presley. I think Brian Abreu has more or less righted his ship. And has been the pitcher we expected to see, although, control has not been there quite as much as it has been in past seasons. Hader's going to be Hader. He gives up he walks a lot of guys and gives up long home runs periodically. In between that, he's pretty brilliant when he's on. Ryan Presley has been a bag of, this is a family-friendly show, a bag of not nice stuff this year. He has struggled with command. I think the last time I looked, and admittedly I've been in Hawaii for a week. I know he had a good outing against somebody because Astros teacher was pretty happy about it because she's a big fan. But he's had, I think, 5 clean innings in his entire season so far. So he's been giving up base runners, allowing guys on, and unfortunately giving up runs. Yesterday, as soon as he gave up that first double, you knew that run was going to score. And it's kind of this, I grew up knowing that I should be afraid of quicksand based on watching a lot of Scooby-Doo. Watching Ryan Presley is quicksand, even when quicksand doesn't really exist in North America the way we expect it to, at least the way I was told to be prepared for it by watching Scooby-Doo. how much longer can Joe Espada stand to have Ryan Presley in that role? And has Brian Abreu kind of earned the chance to maybe take over the eighth inning role, the setup role, and Presley move down? Do we keep them in there? What's your opinion on what should be happening now?
All right. I like the quicksand analogy here because one, quicksand does not exist in North America, as you said. And two, quicksand isn't, oh, you don't realize you're standing on quicksand and all of a sudden 20 seconds later you're up to your neck in it and going to drown. Apparently, if you are in quicksand, you can swim you can float if you know how to swim. Because Ryan Presley, has a 2.77 xFIP, a 2.63 FIP because he's striking out nearly 12 guys an inning. His walk rate is elevated a little bit to one of the 3.24 per 9, so that's the highest in his career. So the command issues are certainly there, but it's mostly he's giving up a bunch of base hits, which is a big problem because we saw yesterday and the lack of clean innings, and of course you expect him to do this, but the question you asked me is going forward. Going forward, is Ryan Presley going to have a 5 ERA? No. Ryan Presley is, and he's pitching like this. He's got a chase rate at 69%, a K rate at 84 percentile among major leaguers. He's just not getting the results, which is a big problem because the losses are real. But should you go ahead? Yeah, I'd keep him. I'd keep him there. If you want to move him out of the eighth inning just because you think that would be better mentally for him, he just sort of needs something different. That's, I'm not sort of qualified. I don't know him enough on a personal level to make that judgment. That's a Joe Espada call if he wants to do that because it would just feel better for everybody. That would be fine. But as far as should you have confidence the next time Ryan Presley comes in the game? Yes. If he gives up a single in the first at bat, should you fear? Again, the emotional hold tells you that you should, so that's understandable.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it was almost a year ago today in the 2023 season where Presley blew a lead to these same Angels. And I think they lost that game 13-12 where they had a pretty good lead going into the last couple of innings. And it was almost a harbinger of some things that were maybe to come if you believe in that sort of thing. And Presley's response to that was, I just need to stop sucking. If I just throw the pitches I need to throw. And from that point, basically from the beginning of the 23 season to that point, it seemed like he was throwing a lot more breaking balls, a lot more off-speed pitches, and decided to start throwing his fastball again. Are we seeing a similar mix this year where he's working on something? Or is it just, have you noticed that the pitch selection or anything else has been different than in the past?
He is he relies on his fastball certainly less than Hader or Abreu, but that's because he has two breaking pitches. He has both a slider and a curveball, can throw sort of different shapes and loves to throw sort of particularly his power curve in, and frankly has a really good changeup that he doesn't use that often because he doesn't need it. So I don't, you should probably tweak, again, from a process standpoint, he seems to be doing fine. From a result standpoint, it's a 417 BABIP. Balls are falling in, career, it's a 295 BABIP. So this is, again, at some point likely to regress to the mean. When that happens, I really would have liked it to happen yesterday. And, at sort of previous occasion throughout the season. So I am less that we need to press the panic button on Ryan Presley than I think, I'm at the 99th percentile on that if I was had a base it has on my StatCast page.
All right. Well, let's talk about some other players that we might be not ready to press a panic button on, but certainly need to discuss. I think chief among those right now is Justin Verlander. And I think there's a lot of things that happened yesterday during the game. You had a good offensive performance from a lot of guys. You had a comeback to take the lead. And Verlander gave up 4 runs and made the game probably a little bit more difficult than it needed to be. I think from where I sit, I don't think it's a secret that Justin Verlander is not the Justin Verlander of 2019 or 2021 or 2022. He's Justin Verlander, who's 41 years old in 2024. Not a bad pitcher, but not a Cy Young level pitcher.
Yeah, absolutely. And the issue that's affecting Verlander is his inability to get swing and miss. His whiff rate right now is at the 27th percentile. I've got a StatCast page up. It's 21.3% strikeout rate this season. That's below major league average. Why is that the case? Because he's 41 years old. And the remarkable thing about Justin Verlander is we didn't have to say that about him until he was in his 40s.
Right.
Because every other pitcher in the majors, who gets into their 30s, Justin Verlander has held off time as long as possible. And as you say, he's not an ineffective pitcher. He's still someone they should send out there, not just so they lack options, but because he's, clearly one of their 5 best pitchers. But he is not Cy Young level Verlander anymore. He is, of course, as we know, an exceedingly smart pitcher, and therefore is going to work real hard to sort of figure things out and try to offer different looks to batters and try to outthink them. But he can't outthrow them anymore. And, well, from a 2024 Astros standpoint, that's something to, be frustrated by and sort of work through. From a 2017 through 2023 Astros standpoint, good Lord, he held that off as long as possible, and we got tons of benefits out of it, including 2 Cy Youngs and 2 World Series titles. So, but yeah, this year it's an issue.
And it's a fine line. I mean, there's a lot of underlying numbers and a lot of things that need to be looked at. I'm sure the Astros are looking at those things. I'm sure Justin Verlander is looking at those things. And if he had only given up 3 runs yesterday instead of 4 runs yesterday, I don't think we're even having this conversation. Probably needed to, but I don't. It's again that emotional hole that the Astros have dug for themselves, and the fans have allowed themselves to fall in. 4 runs is a horrible outing. 3 runs is fine, and it is that final line. But unfortunately, that 4 runs is more the norm for him this season than not, and that's okay. He can be a solid number 2 or number 3 guy in this rotation, except we just put our number 2 on the IL until probably 2026. Fromber is pitching well of late, but I would say inconsistent at best. So you don't really have a number 1 guy in this rotation right now based on results. You certainly have one based on payroll. You certainly have one based on expectation. Those aren't necessarily the same guys anymore. But until, I don't know, a trade is made or Lance McCullers Jr. comes back and throws 36 curveballs in a row and is effective with doing that, I don't know where the Astros turn for starting pitching, for quality starting pitching, even though the guys in the rotation right now are pitching well right now.
Yeah, there's no one has performed like an ace over the course of the season. Now, Fromber did on Friday, and that was real, you hope that would be beneficial to the bullpen, and I guess it was on Saturday. But in general, there is no all-star candidate among the Astros starting pitchers. I guess Ronel Blanco is, which is a nice story, but none of us really think Ronel Blanco is among the, 15, 20 best starting pitchers in baseball, sort of period. He's having a really good year. He's been our best starter this year, and thank goodness, because without him, well, they only have 5. I wrote about this week. They only have 5 healthy starting pitchers right now. So the plan is
that's
the plan is to hope they stay healthy.
Yeah, that's 5 healthy pitchers in the organization. That's not just on the 26-man roster. That's in the organization. Blanco's been a great story. Hunter Brown has figured out a pitch mix for him that's going to work and let him be effective. Those guys are going to face limitations later on in the year. Brown kind of for the second year, and I expect him to be a little bit better than he was in the second half, but he's still a young player who is going to approach a limit in his effectiveness from an inning standpoint. I would assume Blanco is going to be in the same boat. I mean, it could work out that he doesn't experience that, but the odds don't favor that. So there's got to be a move at some point, and whether that move is waiting for McCullers and Garcia to come back, which I hope that's not the only move, or picking up a starter, whatever that is, Dana Brown seems to think this is still a team that's contending for a playoff spot. And I know this show has been very bullish on the Astros contending for a playoff spot, and that bull's gotten smaller and smaller as the season progressed, maybe deeper down that emotional hole. Where are you now with Dana Brown and his, almost public bravado about the state of the roster and the state of the Astros?
Yeah. Well, one thing I've noted about Dana Brown and his public statements is he's an optimist. He always gives a very sort of sunny take, and, maybe that's, normal, but it certainly stands as contrast from his two predecessors in how they would publicly communicate. James Click was always very sort of buttoned down and, pretty much. And, Jeff Luhnow acted like he was offended you were asking him a question. And it's probably how he felt. I actually felt. Anyway, but, so yeah, he's going to be optimistic because he's always optimistic. So I always calibrate what he says to, this sort of basic observation I've had about Dana Brown. Is he looking? Well, look, we listed 3 pitchers who we're not sure can start every 5th day for the rest of the season. In Blanco and Brown, we haven't talked about Spencer Arrighetti. Yeah. But again, so you have 2 rotation candidates returning, hopefully at some point after the All-Star break, in Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers. And so maybe that says you need to pick up a 3rd pitcher. Maybe that's Eric Lauer, who they signed as a minor league free agent and is down at AAA. But I think most of us think if it's a playoff caliber rotation, which is what Dana Brown said about it, then it should be more than some guy you picked up off the street because he was released by the Pirates.
Lots of guys have been released by the Pirates at some point. I think we're going to see an issue with Arrighetti as well, like we're talking about with Brown and Blanco. Last year, with 2 teams combined, Arrighetti pitched 124 innings, and that's the most he's ever pitched in his career. He will eclipse that, assuming he stays healthy, sometime in August. Maybe a little bit before if he has really good outings. And you would think, based on what we saw last year with JP France, with Hunter Brown, that there's going to be a drop-off in performance. So I think even with wishing and hoping that LMJ and Luis Garcia are going to come back and be fully effective immediately, which is not always the case when you come back from a Tommy John surgery or whatever we're calling a colors surgery, because he keeps correcting people from what I've read. It feels like there's got to be somebody else. And I guess the determinant there is how far are they out of a playoff spot and how much are they willing to give? And frankly, what do they have that anybody wants?
Yeah. Well, and part of that is sometimes you can get a guy real cheap if you're willing to take on his salary.
Yep.
But at least your second question is, since they're above the luxury tax threshold, how much salary are they willing to take on, which is an ownership question, because that's extra money that comes out of Jim Crane's profits, and he may not want to do that. So again, we'll sort of that's one of the questions. It is hard to get starting pitchers because on go-go Mets and on go-go Cubs and whatever this morning, they're talking about the same thing. Is like, how do we get our pitchers to how do we get 162 starts? Because we know that, we need to rely on a whole bunch of guys to do that. And so, it's a big issue around the majors for obvious reasons. The Tommy John, number of Tommy Johns just seems to keep escalating. And, it certainly is for the Astros. And so, hey, there's a lot of hope in the Astros plans for the starting rotation. And so let's hope those hopes are realized.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to also acknowledge that for the past 7 years, a lot has gone right for the Astros from an organizational standpoint. Now, some of that is absolutely due to Jeff Luhnow and James Click and the people making decisions, making really good decisions. But a lot of that has just been the luck of not being injured. And even saying that, Verlander missed a season and a half.
Constantly misses.
But staying healthy is a giant part of winning baseball and winning championships. And the Astros have been relatively fortunate in that. Certainly have had their bumps in the road. McCullers is, famous among those. We're starting to see some other injuries pop up, and the Astros, in their typical curious way, want to kind of put their fingers in their ears, it seems, and pretend they're not happening. This week, or I guess last week, we had somebody get hit in the shin, spend 3 days on the bench. A small player, not really important to anything, Kyle Tucker, who's leading the majors in home runs. And then after those 3 days, they put him on the IL. Yesterday, Alex Bregman left the game after getting hit in the hand for the second time in a couple of weeks. Evidently, x-rays are negative, so that's positive, but he's going to be listed day-to-day with hand discomfort. How many games before they put him on the IL and we play shorthanded? What, 3, 5? What's the over-under on that?
First of all, it's Greg Kessinger season, apparently. And his Mauricio Dubon at third base is an adventure. We shall see. The disturbing thing to me about the Kyle Tucker thing is they didn't have somebody. He was supposed to be in the lineup on Friday. And that's apparently what they were planning for. He was just down to one crutch. Which, if he's still on a crutch, he can't bring the crutch out to right field. It's hard to hit. Sure? It's hard to bat. It's hard to bat right with a crutch in one hand. That was the weirdest part of that. I sort of thought on Wednesday, okay, they keep out of the lineup. They got an extra day. It seems like he can go. That was sort of understandable to me. They can backdate it, which they did, and we'll see what they do with Bregman, but it matters. I will say this year, I'm less worried about them playing shorthanded because essentially they've used their 13th active roster spot throughout the season as a guy. Part of Greg Kessinger's value to the team is it's not a complete and total disaster when he goes in the game, but they don't actually have to play him because sorting out the playing time in the outfield and sort of the things around that, which include the DH spot when they move Jordan to the outfield. They basically have more players they'd like to play than they have spots for that in the offense.
Well, the Greg Kessinger spot, that 13th bench guy is the third string quarterback in the NFL. Yeah. He's on the roster. He's drawing a paycheck. He's not active. He gets to wear a uniform in case something bad happens. But other than that, it's not a bad life.
Mm-hmm.
What's the league minimum?
Can we get Greg Kessinger a headset and can he signal in, plays?
I think he has to wear an alternate colored jersey so you don't know who's calling in the plays. But yeah, you'd like to see him produce something other than whatever he's produced now, the 5 at-bats he's had this year. So the week ahead's pretty winnable for the Astros if you look at who they're playing. You've got 3 against the Giants. The Astros have not played well against the Giants the last couple of years. I think last year they got swept in San Francisco, if I recall right. I was in Arizona at an airport watching one of those games, just miserable. But the Giants, as you mentioned earlier, are reeling. After that, you've got an off day and then 3 at home against the Tigers, who the Astros seem to play pretty well against, even with A.J. Hinch knowing all our players. And then you get another off day and you get 3 against the White Sox in Chicago. But the White Sox are truly one of the teams that are
good Lord
paper on the field worse than just about everybody else in the major leagues. So until you get to the Orioles series on the 21st, this is a very manageable part of the schedule.
Yeah.
What are your expectations, if you can have expectations of a team that's 6 games under 500 right now, with these next 5, 8, 10 games?
Can they go 6-3? It's 3 series, and they, the road to the Giants, they should be favorites in all of them. They kind of need to win all of them. Again, we've talked about the emotional hole, but the actual hole in the standings is every loss is something of a big deal now. You can't just shake it off. Like it's the 2022 season. So is it realistic to expect them to win that many? I hope so, because they kind of need to. They need to play 600 ball to really get back in the playoff hunt. Again, I think it's a long, slow process, but they are better than the Giants, who are having an exceedingly frustrating year. They're better than the Tigers, who haven't fully launched yet into their rebuild, and they're better than the White Sox. And do you know who's leading the White Sox in WAR? Corey Julks. And Corey Julks got there 3 weeks ago. So, I think there was a tweet going around about this. It was like, the Astros, I think the implication is the Astros should regret getting rid of Corey Julks. And I just looked at it and said, no, good Lord, are the White Sox terrible? They did get Luis Robert back, which my fantasy team is happy for.
Well, I mean, somebody's happy about that. Luis Robert seems to think he's going to be playing somewhere else soon. He keeps putting out cryptic tweets, and of course, some of our more loyal Astros fans seem to think that means he's going to be in Houston somehow, because we have any pieces to deal for him. Evidently, the White Sox are asking for a package bigger than what the Padres are asking for Juan Soto. So that seems realistic.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay to want things.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I believe in Christmas. The good news is that the Rangers haven't run away with the division. The Mariners have as many problems, if not more, than the Astros right now with starting pitching. They're a game and a half behind the Rangers for second place. I think we're 3.5 or 4 out of the wild card. Mariners are 6.5 ahead right now, but that fluctuates because the Mariners are very prone to losing 2-3 games in a row. I want to say this before we get off this Angels series. I am impressed with the Angels from the perspective of they're not a good team. And with Mike Trout out, they're a really bad team talent-wise. Ron Washington keeps them competitive in games. And I don't know that I gave Ron Washington enough credit for keeping the Rangers competitive when he was their manager. And I know the Braves front office and Braves fans raved about Ron Washington while he was their bench coach. And, I kind of yawned at, well, the Angels are going to get him, and that's who cares. But I will say that the Angels, while they don't win a lot of games, at least look like they know what they're doing, which is an improvement over the Phil Nevin era and some other things. So the division's interesting from that perspective. But from an Astros perspective, we're not far out of anything. It's just we can't get the momentum.
Yeah.
And I guess it's back to the emotional hole that we opened the show with. It's how do you capture that momentum? It doesn't seem to have that ability.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're 4-2. If they continue to stay 4, if they continue to win 2 out of every 3 games throughout the season, they'll be in good shape, just as all the losses are painful. And at this point here, you can't just shake them off. So again, the emotional hole is real. And important. Seattle's on a pace to win 89 games. And so later in the season, I'll look at sort of games back. But right now, for me, the question is, can the Astros get to high 80s, low 90s? In order to do that, they need to basically be on a 100-win pace, which is, again, over 600. So that's sort of the marker I'm looking at. They would have been 600 had they won yesterday. So since they were 7-19, since the season reached their low point, but they're one off of that. So, make it up this week by sweeping the Giants or the Tigers, and we're fine, right? I'm fine. Everything's fine for us Astros fans, right?
Have we swept anybody this year?
We swept the
Besides
A's.
The Rockies. The Rockies don't count. That was out of country. I don't know if those games even count in the standings. I hope they do. It'll be interesting. It feels like they're right there. But again, the same thing we've been talking about all year. You'll have 3 games where the offense looks really good, and then they disappear for a couple of games. You have 3 or 4 games where the starting rotation looks really solid, and then they blow up. And then our bullpen is a constant mystery, minus a couple pieces. So big job for Joe Espada and his coaching staff. and I really hope the offense continues to be consistent and consistently score runs, because I think it's getting late early for Alex Cintron, because we're about at the point of the season where you start making sacrificial moves if you need to prove to the fan base that something's going to happen.
Yeah, possibly so. I will note that the decision last offseason was to keep everything the same. They made 2 moves in the coaching staff. They moved Espada from bench coach to manager. His bench coach was the first base coach, and they brought in a first base coach. So everything's the same. So it's a continuity move. So I don't know if they'll fire one guy, but again, they don't make the playoffs. It's possible they make a bigger move at the end of the season, but we're a long way away from having that conversation. Because we'll have plenty of time if they play 500 the rest of the season to talk about that in August and September.
Oh, I think we're sooner than that. That's an all-star break kind of move. We need a new voice. Alex did a great job, but they need to hear something different from a different guy, and they'll dust off Jeff Bagwell, who's drawing a paycheck, and let him be hitting coach for a while or something to really fire up the angry Twitter fans. The only other thing I have is that for the 8th time in program history, the Texas Aggies made it to the College World Series yesterday, spotting the Oregon Ducks. I guess that's a thing. A 5-run lead, and then let it get to 6 at some point, and then scored 9 runs in an inning because the Oregon coach didn't seem to notice that his pitcher at the time walked 5 runs in or something like that. I'll take it because I don't care, because it doesn't really matter how you get to Omaha as long as you get to Omaha. But as a person who has experienced a lot of success in Omaha, what does a college baseball team need to do besides get hot at the right time, Ole Miss, to win that tournament?
Find a pitcher who has been terrible during the season and have him have the game or two of his life in Omaha. I mean, it really always seems to come down to some guy you've never heard of, pitching a great game. My other big Omaha interest is last year LSU fans drank 68,600 Jell-O shots at Rocco's, the bar across the street, and I'm intrigued to see if the teams there this year will reach that number combined. I have bad news for Rocco's.
Florida I will say there's a lot of things that you can admire.
Let me say this here. As an LSU fan, I'm disappointed we didn't make it. But the SEC has, the SEC usually sends really strong teams with these really great fan bases, like A&M this year, like Mississippi the year it went, like Mississippi State, Arkansas when it goes. Florida manages to have this great team and have no one in Gainesville interested in it. And so I say shame on all Florida fans for not embracing your baseball team. Good luck to the Aggies.
Yeah, if Georgia wins today, there'll be 5 of the 8 teams from the SEC, the other 3 coming from the ACC. So the balance of college baseball power certainly sits in a very specific geographic seat this year. All right. War Astros, I guess. Let's win 3 in San Francisco and make some hay the rest of this week. For Jim, who is swimming with turtles right now, we've been told, and thinks that we are handsome, so he took a break from that. I appreciate it, Jim. For Brian, I'm Andy. This is Go Astros, and have a great week.
Go Astros.